It's episode number 8 of the second season of Exit Philosophy. And Rich Griffin and I, Scott MacArthur, come to you on Monday, February the 26th. The Blue Jays have played a couple of Grapefruit League games, the Phillies and the Yankees, over the weekend. If you are coming to us for full and complete breakdowns of what happened in the 7th and 8th innings of both of those games, you have come to the wrong place. But we will talk about the general topics of the sport as we always do. And Griff, first of all, it's just great to see baseball back on our TV screens again. That's number one. And number two, I don't know, maybe somebody heard all of my complaining, because I'm going to take credit for this. All of my complaining last week about all these big name free agents not signing yet. Cody Bellinger put pen to paper on a contract that I don't think anybody, not the least of which MLB trade rumors, expected.
Yeah, he signed with your guys, the Cubs. That's your team, and he re-signed with them. What were they saying? 12 years, $284 million?
It was 12 years. These are projections that you get.
And MLB Trade Rumors does a lot of work on it. They have their top 50 list, and they project landing spot, years, and total dollars. And they were so far off with Cody Bellinger. It makes you wonder about the remaining free agents, a guy like Matt Chapman. And they're talking about Matt Chapman maybe still being a fit for the Cubs, but we're thinking something else. You're the one who brought it up, but does that make him a more attractive fit with the Toronto Blue Jays?
Well, that's what I'm wondering, right? You and I were going back and forth last night discussing topics for this show, and the first thought that I had when I saw that Cody Bellinger signed a 3-year, $80 million contract with the Cubs with opt-outs after years 1 and 2. So this is essentially, you got 80 guaranteed if you stay with it, if you're Bellinger, which is not a bad thing, right? That's life-changing money. He's already made a lot of money. But he's also going to have the opportunity to go back to market a year from now if he has another good year, 2 years from now if he continues to show that he's bounced back from those down years with LA. And I thought to myself, the Jays have not been linked to Matt Chapman for months now. And quite frankly, for me, it made sense. I just was never big on going anywhere near MLB Trade Rumors' projection for Chapman when the offseason started, which was 6 years and $150 million. Chapman, to me, is the type of guy, and maybe I hone in on individual players a lot when I describe this, when really what I'm describing is the entire league. But, Javier Baez with the Cubs, right? And ends up with the Mets and then signs the big deal with the Tigers. I looked at that contract he signed with the Tigers and I said to myself, the moment the defense starts to flail, and inevitably it does because your range diminishes as you get older, but the moment the defense starts to flail, that is a complete albatross of a contract. And it has been nothing but an albatross for the 2 years the Tigers have been linked to it. There are still 4 years to go because Baez, who had an opt-out after 2 years, opted in for the next 4 because obviously nobody else would be crazy enough to pay him a 6-year, $140 million contract because he's playing like a minor leaguer. Chapman, to me, Baez being an extreme example, is the sort of guy that once the range starts to leave him at third base, then he is like absolutely just a guy. Just a guy. Because you're going to get 20 to 25 home runs. You can get that from a lot of different people. So when the defense starts to go, the range starts to go at third base, he becomes just a guy. That's what scares me off from the 4, 5, or 6 year contracts. Bellinger signs with the Cubs on a deal that I don't think Scott Boras wanted to sign, but hey, it's almost March. Well, what does that mean for Matt Chapman? What's Matt Chapman going to get in a market like this now? And if Matt Chapman is going to end up with something similar to Bellinger, regardless of the dollars, I'm less concerned about dollars when the term is short. If the term is going to be short and there are going to be opt-outs, say next year and the year after, if you're the Blue Jays, jump right back in on the Matt Chapman. I feel like this opens the door to Matt Chapman possibly returning to Toronto. Why not? There's no risk.
Regular listeners and viewers of Exit Philosophy understand that we're not in this to predict what the Blue Jays will do. We're here to tell them what they should do. And after thinking about it, with the terms coming out of Cody Bellinger's deal, the same agent, Scott Boras did the same thing with Carlos Correa when he originally went from Houston and signed with the Twins. He opted out after the first year. It was only a 3-year deal. He opted out after the first year, then failed a couple of physicals and ended up going back to the Twins, where he is right now. And he signed a longer term deal. But in terms of Matt Chapman coming back to the Blue Jays, you don't want second base and third base with the Blue Jays being part-time positions. You don't want guys jumping in and out and nobody playing more than 81, nobody playing more than half of a season at either second base or third base. And to me, Isaiah Kiner-Falefa is best suited to be the Whit Merrifield role, which is not to be the starting third baseman. So where does that leave you? It leaves you with a 39-year-old. And as you point out, defensive abilities as you get older start to dissipate a little bit. And Justin Turner's a great player. They signed him basically to be the DH, but if he had to play third base, he could. But now that these circumstances with Matt Chapman are in order, and the same agent who just signed the top free agent offensive player to a 3-year deal with opt-outs after year 1 and year 2, to me, 3 years is the perfect length of contract to re-sign Matt Chapman, and the maximum would be the same as Bellinger. He's not going to get more than Cody Bellinger got. Bellinger coming off a great year and being younger, I believe younger. So you're maxing out at $80 million. You're maxing out at 3 years opt-outs. The Jays have that qualifying offer attached to the Chapman negotiations right now. So that's a deterrent to other teams. If Chapman signed with the Jays and had opt-outs after year 1 and year 2 in a 3-year deal, like Correa, like Cody Bellinger, there would be no qualifying offer attached, and that would allow for better negotiations for Scott Boras. And he could use that because he needs not to have failed in any contract that he negotiates. He needs not to have failed. And to remove a qualifying offer for another round of negotiations following the 24 season, he could explain that he did that on purpose and has not failed. Let's go get him Matt Chapman. But the other thing for me about Chapman on a short-term deal with the Blue Jays is that it still allows you to negotiate in good faith with Bo Bichette and Vlad Guerrero Jr. And as regular listeners know, that's my thing that really needs to be done moving forward for this franchise to be successful for the rest of this decade.
Yeah, I'm with you on all of that. If Matt Chapman ends up a Chicago Cub and joins Bellinger as a Boras client at Wrigley, or if he signs with the Giants, we're not going to be surprised. I just think the Bellinger contract is a game changer. Now, there are 3 years, correct me if I'm wrong, I think it's 3 years in terms of age between Bellinger and Chapman being older, right? So he's going to play his age 31 year here coming up. Bellinger, I believe, is going to play his age 28 year. So Boras can say to, as I choke on my words, Boras can say to Bellinger, hey, man, like, you're 28. You go have another really good year at Wrigley Field, which is a hitter's haven, and then you become a really nice, you opt out, and you become a really nice left-handed hitting consolation prize, no insult intended, for the teams that wanted Juan Soto but didn't get him. right? Chapman, it becomes interesting. I'm just trying to think this through from his perspective. So he'll be entering his age 32 season a year from now, pretending he does a short-term deal with opt-outs. You know, what can he really expect, Griff, in terms of a long-term contract at any point between now and the end of his career? Because what I think is teams looked, you know, the Prince Fielders of the world. I always thought it was Prince Fielder's knees that were going to give out. Very sadly, it was his neck. It was totally unrelated to body type entering his 30s. He had a very serious neck injury and had to retire. But Albert Pujols and the Angels, the prime example, right? I just don't think once you're on the other side of 30, you're getting these unending or seemingly unending contracts now.
Yeah, so the caveat contract, the comparable for Chapman to me would be Josh Donaldson, who signed and then disappointed.
Yeah,
same position, same background, coming out of the A's system and establishing himself and playing 158 games a year, 150 plus. Chapman had a couple of freaky injuries that cut into his time, but yeah, that's a
Donaldson's a much better hitter.
Yeah.
So because Donaldson got 4.92 from the Twins, right?
I think Chapman's exit velocities tend to make people think that he can be that hitter. He can be a primo major league power hitter, except for the fact that he's in his 30s already and it hadn't happened.
Right. Yeah. I mean, he had a really good season in Oakland that one year, and that's a difficult park to hit home runs in, especially at night. We know that, but
in terms of team payroll for the Blue Jays, if you're still concerned about signing your two cornerstone homegrown guys, which I am, you've got the 24 and 25 season as their pre-free agent years, which are going to be lower, which are going to be the years that you have Matt Chapman for. Plus, after the 25 season, you will hopefully have a couple of starting pitchers out of your own system coming in to fill in that terrific rotation that they have right now. And you're going to have Chris Bassett expiring, Kikuchi after this season, and Gausman for one more year after 25, so through 26. So in terms of payroll, it's the perfect storm for signing Matt Chapman for a 2 or 3 year deal and expecting that with Scott Boras as his agent, he will opt out as soon as he has a tremendous year for the Blue Jays.
Griff, you know, like, I'm firmly on board with this. And one of the things I've required of myself in much more meaningful decision-making over my life, rather than just, hey, how does this affect Matt Chapman, is go with my gut. Your gut knows what you want. The first thing I thought of when Cody Bellinger signed with the Cubs, or I heard that Cody Bellinger had signed with the Cubs, I said, this just lines up for the Jays and Chapman. I mean, theoretically, it lines up for any team in Major League Baseball to bring Chapman in. But you know what? If I'm Ross Atkins right now, I'm thinking to myself, you know what would be great? We bring Matt Chapman back. I don't care. 3-year deal, right? $75 million, $80 million. Make him happy. It's certainly got to be more than the qualifying offer. You can't insult
right. Absolutely.
The AAV.
Yeah.
And bring him back, give him the opt-outs, and you know, it's like, hey, Matty, go hit 30 or 35 home runs for us this year and then take your powder if you want. Go find that 4 or 5 year contract somewhere else with $125 million locked in. But in 2024, you know, and then if he's like a 20 home run hitter and he's a 101 OPS plus guy, league average hitter, and he decides to opt in for year 2, well, you still got pretty good defense at the hot corner. You still got a guy who's going to hit the occasional home runs. I can find ways to fall back in love with Matt Chapman under the right parameters. And I think the Bellinger contract provides that. And I also, just as an offshoot, Griff, like, Scott Boras has got more money than God. right? He's been at this for decades, and he has had some of the biggest clients in baseball history. He's not suffering. But I really wonder what's going through his mind.
Well,
he didn't wait 5 months for Cody Bellinger to sign opt-out 3-year deal for $80 million.
Yeah, it's a failed off season for Scott Boras, clearly, because, I mean, you just look at, you think that MLB trade rumors pull those numbers out of their butt? No, they were handed those numbers, 12 years, 284. This is what we're looking for, said someone from Boras Corp. And now they end up with this, but the pep talk that Boras can give Matt Chapman so that nobody's disappointed is that I've got you a guaranteed $75 million, let's say, if it's slightly less than what Cody Bellinger gets with the Cubs. $75 million, and you, with a good season, have the opportunity to parlay that like Carlos Correa did, even in his third option coming back to the Twins after failing physicals with the Mets and somebody else.
Giants.
Yeah. You can come back and do the same thing. So this is not a failed offseason. This is another step towards making you comfortable the rest of your career. So even though it's a failed offseason, Scott Boras always has talking points, and he always is able to give his clients pep talks and make them feel like they're winners. And in this case, it's pretty easy. Like you or I wouldn't even take Scott Boras saying, okay, Scotty, here's $75 million for the next 3 years. I'm sorry, that's all I could get for you. What would be your reaction?
Yeah, I'd be like, okay, I'll play for 3 years and $75 million, and then none of you will ever see or hear from me again.
Right.
And if you're my close enough friend, I'll invite you to the island and you can chill for as long as you want. But I'm gone. Bye.
So we're not saying that this is what is going to happen with Matt Chapman, but there's never been a clearer path to his reentry with the Blue Jays to play third base for a shorter period than expected, for 3 years, than there is right now. And we're saying that this is what should happen. We're not predicting that it will happen.
You're really leaning in on that. We're not reporting this thing, Griff. You're looking to be.
I've been saying that since season 1.
Episode. No, I agree with you. No, we're just throwing shit. We're just throwing shit around here. I think it's totally logical to come back to what you said about IKF, Isaiah Kiner-Falefa playing the Whit Merrifield role. The only issue with that is IKF can't hit.
Yeah, but he can play shortstop, which Whit could not do. So a backup shortstop allows you to consider deals for some of those other infielders that won't have roles when matched.
Right. I agree with you 100% on that front. And so, because I think there might be some people listening going, well, where does Chapman even fit when you consider that there's Davis Schneider and there's Santiago Espinal and there's Isaiah Kiner-Falefa and Ernie Clement is out of options and this guy and da-da-da. And I'm like, hey, you know what? I still haven't been, I out of all of those names, I have not listed a name yet that jumps off the page as a now contributor better than Matt Chapman.
Yeah, I don't think there's any place for Ernie Clement on this team. Santiago Espinal is one of my favorite guys. I asked for him to be my catcher when I threw out that first pitch last April. Unfortunately, he was in the lineup that day, so I got Tim Meza. I got the bat boy. but yeah, no, I love all those utility middle infielder guys that they have, but there's just no room. And to get Santiago Espinal somewhere where he could have playing time would be doing him a favor. And so there is ways to make room for Matt Chapman to return and bring his Gold Glove defense to a pitching staff that is going to really need it if they're scoring fewer runs even than they did last year.
Yeah, and I didn't even mention Biggio. So I mean, there's just a lot of quantity there right now, and you've got to pare it down. But I was griping last week, Griff, about my disinterest in the MLB hot stove season, and I just love No sarcasm intended. I just love how the hot stove season has crashed right into grapefruit and cactus league baseball. I mean, that's definitely what you want.
Yeah.
But now all of a sudden I'm in on this Chapman thing. And look, we're sitting here on Monday, February the 26th, kind of around the lunch hour, Eastern time. Matt Chapman could sign with the Cubs or Giants by the time you're listening to this podcast. And the first 20 minutes are just us spewing hot air. I understand that, but I do think there's a reality here that it's worth it for Ross Atkins to circle back and check in with Scott Boras. I mean, the organization's done a good job of rekindling that relationship with the game's most prominent and powerful agent, starting with Hyunjin Ryu 4 years ago. They went over and above for Ryu, right? They gave him the extra year and the extra $20 million, the 4-year, $80 million contract. I don't think there was another offer out there for Ryu that was beyond 3 years at the time. And he had a barking shoulder and had a kind of litany of injuries through his Dodgers tenure. And I'm not saying Boras would repay that, but what I'm saying is that there's a good relationship there. I think you're not doing your due diligence if you don't at least, we may never know about it if he doesn't sign with the Jays, but I don't think you're doing your due diligence if you don't circle back.
And among the Boras clients remaining, I mean, clearly JD Martinez is a good DH hitter option, but he doesn't have a position that helps. And you've got Justin Turner there already. So of the two Boras clients that are left, Matt Chapman fits that bill much better. You look at Jorge Soler, and you know that the Blue Jays front office is trying to add one more hitter because we've talked about it all winter, is they still need to fill those new expensive seats. And they need to fill those expensive seats at a renovated stadium behind home plate with a lot of people who aren't real baseball fans, Blue Jay fans. They're business people who have a lot of money to spend. And bringing Matt Chapman back would help sort of the identity of the tickets that you're trying to sell in terms of recognition factor for business people who aren't real big Blue Jays fans. So they need something like that. And if they don't sign Matt Chapman, it's a missed opportunity as far as exit philosophy, Scotty Mac and me are concerned.
There better be one seat in those expensive new digs for home plate lady. Blue Jays Nona. I would put a throne. I would put a throne behind home plate, give her a crown, and I just want to see the waiters just bringing caviar. Like, she's a legend.
And in Buffalo,
they gotta find a way.
The cardboard cutout of home plate lady, and that didn't quite do it. But I just watched a little bit of the game from Tampa on TV. At Yankee Stadium at Steinbrenner Field, and to watch those fans ducking out of the way on foul balls into the netting, you think of home plate lady every time when you see that. Like,
and she
what
doesn't
a brave
even
woman she is.
But she sat in those seats for like 2.5 decades. Some of those foul balls, like those tips that go right back to the backstop and smack right into the fence, like would hit her in the face if there was no fencing there. She doesn't even flinch now.
Yeah.
And yeah, been there, done that. I'm good. I know I'm safe.
She's reached a celebrity point where there's a golf cart that brings her in from left field about 40 minutes during batting practice, brings her in. She just sits straight upright, doesn't look right, doesn't look left, gets out, gets to her seat, and boom, she's there for the game.
I'm telling you, Griff, I'm telling you, you keep that whole act going. Throne, crown, personal servers for the entire game. Queen Elizabeth has passed away. People are kind of hankering for the way that it was. She could come in on that golf cart and do the little, if you're watching on youtube.com/exit philosophy, the Queen's wave there, that short little sort of, turn of the hand. Oh, yeah. Let's do it up.
If the Jays do not add Matt Chapman or someone else to complete the picture that is the 24 Blue Jays, Ross Atkins could be like home plate GM, where nothing makes him flinch, and it should.
Go get Matt Chapman.
Yes.
That ties a bow on that topic. So
Short
did
term,
you,
3
Griff?
years, no more than 3 years.
Pardon me, no more than 3 years?
Yeah, I
Absolutely.
mean, get Matt Chapman, but not for 7 or 8. Get him for 3, the same way Cody Bellinger. Get him for similar terms to Cody Bellinger, and you can still make everything else that we've talked about for the last 5 or 6 episodes as we waited for the Blue Jays and waited for the hot stove league to get hot. That could all still happen with a short-term 3-year deal for Matt Chapman.
Right, and here's the other thing. Contain opt-outs after year 1 and year 2.
Yeah, and hope he takes
Griff, even I would make the argument that just given everything else going on, you're cheering for him to take that opt-out regardless.
It means he had a great year. If he hits 30 home runs and drives in close to 100 and plays Gold Glove defense and opt out, then mission accomplished for you.
God bless you. More power to you.
Yeah. But if he doesn't take it, it means that he had a shitty year. It means that he's bobbling balls, that age is catching up with him, and his 100-mile-an-hour exit velocity line drives were all caught, and you don't want that.
Yeah, we'll coin a term. We don't want him to Javier Baez the Blue Jays in our little hypothetical scenario here. We don't want to be Javier Baez by this experience. Did you have on your bingo card see-through pants being the talk of Major League Baseball as players reported to spring training and started their grapefruit or cactus league games?
I did not, but Major League Baseball deserves better than that. I remember a see-through pant issue when I was managing a team in the Oakland A's system. I forget what year it was, but they changed pant manufacturers. I tried them on, and you could see whether I had my shirt tucked in properly or not. You could see my boxers or briefs, and like they were so clingy. I felt like I said to you before, I felt like Rafael Nadal getting ready to serve. It was terrible. So I went and bought my own pants, the right colors. But when I saw this as an issue with Major League Baseball, I identified right away. And I would not have worn them all season. And I just didn't wear them all season.
It's like Robbie Ray became famous in Toronto for the tight pants. If these are going to go forward with Robbie Ray's, he should just walk around with a Polaroid photo of his prostate. Here, just look at it. You can pretty much see it now anyway. Here, have a look. Right? I mean, how does this happen? Griff, it's not like, okay, we cut a new deal with Nike, who, by the way, have never been in the clothing business before, right?
Obviously, Tiger Woods golf shirts, and then
who's Nike at the end of the day? They've never done this before. You cut a deal with Nike, you have prototypes, right? There's a lot of back and forth. There's a lot of feedback. I'm sure players would have been involved in this. Like, hey, can you try these pants on? Tell me what you think. Oh, you looked in the mirror and you saw yourself in full form. Like, okay, we got an issue here.
They must not have had anyone try them on, because if you hold them up, they look just like normal pants. You don't know.
Right.
When you actually have somebody try them on, so it's Major League marketing must not have had, then you can see all the problems, and whoever was your model would go, I can't wear these. And it reminded me of Montreal Expos when they made the trade Rusty Staub to the Mets for Singleton, Jorgensen, and Tim Foley. It was a great deal for both teams, actually. Only in 72, when the season started, turns out Ken Singleton, who was playing right field in place of Rusty, was allergic to the wool uniforms. So he broke out in rashes. It was terrible. They couldn't figure it out. I put him on the disabled list. And then when they finally figured it out, they just changed the whole, as a team, changed to double knit, which, I mean, we were talking earlier, that's much cooler anyway. Wool in 100-degree or 35-degree temperatures.
Yeah.
That is not what I would imagine being comfortable in a uniform. And Singleton went on to have a great year, great couple of years, went to Baltimore, had some great seasons there, but always wearing double knit.
If you've ever been, well, you have, Griff, so I'm talking to you, the royal you, the listener. If you've not been to Kauffman Stadium in Kansas City, and people always ask, I don't know how you feel about this, Griff, but people always ask, give me an underrated stop. And I don't even know if Pittsburgh's an underrated stop now because the stadium's so beautiful. Everybody talks about it. And if you're in the greater Toronto area, Pittsburgh's like a 5-hour drive. And of course, the Jays go there every other year now, hopefully on weekends. And that way you can go take the family or go with some buddies, whatever you want. But Kansas City is definitely that. So Pat Tabler, our good friend, he played for Cleveland. He played for the Cubs. He obviously played on the 92 World Series winning Jays teams, but he played for Kansas City for a period of time in his career. And that was back when Kauffman Stadium had AstroTurf, as a lot of stadiums did back then. And Kauffman is dug in. So you enter Kauffman Stadium at street level and you go down. And I don't know if you've ever been to Kansas City in July, but it's like 140 Fahrenheit on the field. Famous stories of like Bo Jackson and different Royals players cracking eggs on the cement ledge of the dugout when they're on offense and watching the eggs fry. Pat Tabler would tell stories back then, of course, with their metal cleats. He'd go out into the outfield and he'd come back and his cleats had melted. The turf was so hot. Can you imagine wearing wool uniforms in the 1970s on weekend afternoon home games at Royals Stadium after what is now Kauffman Stadium opened? Can you imagine what that must have felt like?
Even more so when it had artificial turf, which those teams did all in that era. And it reminded me of St. Louis Cardinals at Busch Stadium with the artificial turf. And again, the completely surrounded, so little breeze, no breeze, they had thermometers that they stuck in the turf, and it was like 125 degrees. And Tony Scott, who was a young outfielder developed within the Expos system, he went in the clubhouse between innings and he went to the kitchen and he opened the fridge and he put stacks of lettuce in his spikes to cool his feet off. Wow. So he wore lettuce in the outfield. Sounds like a Disney movie or something.
Angels in the outfield?
Lettuce.
But its sequel, lettuce in the outfield.
He said that was the only way to keep his feet cool. It's crazy. But yeah, wool disappeared around that time for most major league teams, but to be allergic to it and be a major league player and have to wear your uniform every day was probably, maybe that's why the Mets traded him. Maybe he didn't tell them that he was allergic, and so he was being affected on the field, because he came to Montreal and I think he had 100 RBIs, 100 runs scored, and 100 walks one season, like his 73 season when he was wearing double digits.
Yeah. Remember that Seinfeld episode that starts with George Costanza giving Danny Tartable some tips on his swing, and then George gets into this headspace, hey, like these polyester uniforms, they're not working. We got to switch to cotton. And he approaches Buck Showalter. It's great to go back and look at this now, right? Like you saw Jeter after they won the 96 World Series. He looks like a kid, right? Yeah. Obviously, he was in his early 20s. Showalter 30 years ago, it looks so much younger than he does now. And Costanza's up in his, Buck, can I talk to you about something? Sure. How are things going? Everything okay? Well, there's something up with Tartable's swing, but otherwise, so going back to Costanza messing with, and then George is like, well, I got this idea, like the polyester, the players are a little too hot. Think about, you go out there in cotton uniforms and your opponent's in polyester and you're 5% cooler. Don't you think that's going to be an advantage on those hot summer days? And Showalter's like, well, George, you might you might be onto something. Oh, I'm onto something. So
those
like
were
just
those were the years when the assistant to the traveling secretary had more real responsibilities.
That's right. Yeah. Or Costanza was insinuating himself a little too much into the Yankees business. But my point is, sitcoms and all that, you watch that and you're like, there's no way in real life that would happen, Griff, right? That George Costanza and Buck Showalter would actually have a conversation about the type of fabric of the uniforms and then have that cause issues. But then you realize why these sitcoms and these shows work so well is that they actually do reflect real life. That Major League Baseball has provided its players with pants that are see-through. And we thought the generalized font of the lettering, the names on the backs of jerseys, the fact that they're all uniform now and all the same for every team, that was going to get our guff. No, it's the see-through pants. It's just so weird how this has not been like properly dealt with and the lead up to its unveiling.
Yeah, and as you point out with sitcoms, I think The Simpsons 20 years ago had Donald Trump being president of the United States, like in one of their episodes. So they were prescient.
They were prescient, finger on the pulse of the culture.
Anyway, as we're speaking here, we've gone through a weekend of Grapefruit League games, and the Blue Jays have allowed 26 runs in 2 games, which this is supposed to be their strength is pitching. They're 0-2 heading into a game that's about to start as we speak on Monday, and we'd just like to calm people down and say that spring training results are not what you care about. In 92-93, the Blue Jays went 14-21 and 13-21, and then went on to win the World Series. And so, it's nice to see all these kids play, because from the third at bat on, usually this early in camp, you're going to see minor leaguers the rest of the time. Names that now more minor leaguers, people do, and you get a chance to actually see them. Like Leo Jimenez, they said his glove is ready for the major leagues right now. And I watched him on Saturday throw a ball over first base that almost hit the screen. And on Sunday at Yankee Stadium, have a ball bounce off his chest over towards second base. 2 errors in 2 games. And this is a guy that the club has been saying is major league ready defensively. So don't put a lot of stock in results at spring training. Just sit back and enjoy.
There's a difference between being ready for the major leagues and being ready for Grapefruit League. Right? I mean,
this guy played all winter.
Well, absolutely. As you were saying, as you were talking about, and by the way, and even if Kevin Gausman and Chris Bassett or Jose Barrios and Yusei Kikuchi had started the 2 games for the Jays, I still wouldn't be freaking out. But it's not like the 2/5 of the starting rotation got torched over the weekend. And to your point about the records of the World Series winning Blue Jays teams in Grapefruit League play in the 92 and 93 spring trainings, do you remember the name Jerry Shunk?
That predated me, I think, early 90s.
Right, you were still working for the Montreal Expos. So you were over there on the Atlantic coast being like hoity-toity. Well, over on the Gulf Coast at the time, Griff, there was a second baseman named Jerry Shunk. And he'd been in the Blue Jays organization dating back to 1986 when he broke in with the St. Catharines Blue Jays, later to be the St. Catharines Stompers of the New York Penn League, Single A. And Jerry Shunk, the second baseman, had an unbelievable spring training down in Dunedin for the Blue Jays. Now, he was not going to usurp the starting second baseman for the Toronto Blue Jays of the time, Hall of Famer Roberto Alomar. So what became of Jerry Shunk and that wonderful spring that he had in 1992? A total of 0 big league innings. Played better part of a decade at AAA. I mean, good ball player. If you're a AAA baseball player, you're a good ball player. because you're just one level down from the major leagues. Not many people make the major leagues, not taking anything away from Jerry Shunk. But the point is that let's not overreact before the calendar even hits March. And then when it does, let's not even overreact in March.
Yeah, I even, speaking of one more prospect that can't miss at Blue Jays camp, I remember Mitch Webster, outfielder, switch hitter, good center fielder, not great defensively, but a good enough. And he had an amazing spring training in 82 or 83. I think it was 83, then played 11 games that season with the big club. But I remember him because he was traded over to the Montreal Expos, where he became a regular center fielder in the mid 80s. And I asked him, I saw those spring training numbers. That was great. How did you not make the team coming out of camp? And he went, well, I figured Lloyd Mosby maybe was the reason he didn't make that team. But there's always stories like that at every spring training. And when you talk about don't pay attention, you think of a guy like Nate Pearson. Everybody's got high hopes for Nate Pearson, not as high as they were 5 years ago. But he came into the Sunday game, or was it the Saturday game? And he gave up a 3-run homer, gave up 4 runs in 2/3 of an inning. But the thing is, he's been looking to add a splitter. He threw 1 splitter to strike out a hitter that just dove out of the strike zone. It was a beautiful pitch. But when you're working on a pitch, and a lot of these guys are at spring training, especially if they've been around a few years, things can go wrong. All you need is 1 pitch, 2 pitches, 3 pitches that don't react, but you're seeing them in a game, and that's the encouraging thing for the coaching staff and for the player himself. So the fact that Nate Pearson gave up 4 runs in 2/3 of an inning doesn't write him off, because we don't know what he was working on and what results they saw. He was throwing 98, throwing 99. So that was still there. But we need to give him room to breathe through the month of March, and then we'll see where it goes from there. But he's another guy who could be trade bait, who could be going back to AAA. We don't know, but the results it's not going to be because of his pitching line in the Grapefruit League.
Yeah, and I mean, I remember last year Chris Bassett wasn't maxing out his velocity, and he's like, well, I don't know. I mean, there's only 6 months of real baseball to come here. Like, I don't need to be throwing through the backstop on March the 1st, sort of thing. And so I keep that in mind too, with things like pitchers' velocity, because spring training and everybody it's so long. And I mean, it's kind of good that it's long from a fan's perspective. I mean, if you ever have the opportunity and the wherewithal to go down and catch some games, the Blue Jays, Dunedin, Clearwater, they're 10 minutes apart where the Phillies play. Go down to Bradenton. That Pirates Park is a fun little stop. You go down further down the coast on the Gulf side, and the Braves have a great new facility in Northport, and the Rays are in Port Charlotte, although I think that was under construction last year. I assume it's done and they're back in Port Charlotte. You go down further to Fenway South and Fort Myers, and the Twins have their place in that area too. You go across to the Atlantic side and Astros, Marlins, et cetera, et cetera. Like, it's a great thing to do. So it's nice that it's long that way, but from like an actual functional perspective for big league teams, it's for guys to get at bats, and they used to say, I need about 50, 60 plate appearances in spring to feel like I'm entering opening day in some kind of groove. Pitchers are the ones who really need it, because the starters, presuming they're pitching in Grapefruit League games, sometimes they do it on the backfield. Mark Burley almost never threw in Grapefruit League games, right? He'd always be at the complex, throwing to minor leaguers. But you start with 1 inning and maybe 20 pitches, and then it's 40 pitches, and then you bump up to 60, and then you're at 80, and then you kind of 90 to 100, and then you dial back that final start before the regular season, and you feel like you're in a groove and you're ready to go. So it's really about pitchers working on things and pacing themselves. And I wouldn't even focus so much on velocity until maybe later in the spring. Like if Alek Manoah doesn't hit anything more than 86 over the next 6 weeks, toward the end, that's a worry. But outside of extreme outliers, these guys are just getting ready for when it matters.
Yeah, and there's just a big difference between the Cactus League in Arizona in the Phoenix area, where 15 teams train, and Florida, where 15 teams train. The difference is that if you're a Blue Jays fan and you go to Fort Myers, don't expect to see too many regular players on that bus ride, because it's a 3-hour bus ride. I mean, even the game in Tampa, I think Alejandro Kirk might have been the only Sunday starter who was a real major leaguer. There were others who had played in the major leagues briefly in 2023, but the only starter, if you went over there to see your fair share of Blue Jay regulars playing, you were disappointed. And it's the same with every park that you go to in Florida on the road. If you're a baseball fan, you're seeing the home team star players, which is great. Should be great. The sun is out. It's a great experience, as you said, but it's not. And that's another thing that affects your win-loss record, is if your farm system is no good, you're not going to win very many road games at spring training, because all your minor leaguers are playing in those games and they're getting their ass kicked.
Yeah.
But you look at you talk about Burley not pitching in very many Grapefruit League games, because there's 3 AL East opponents training on that side of Florida. Often you won't get a manager bringing his starter, because you don't want the familiarity of Chris Bassett pitching against the Red Sox or the Rays, and so you won't see that either. Marcus Stroman was supposed to pitch yesterday for the Yankees. They had a split squad. He, of course, went across to Clearwater so he didn't have to face the Blue Jays, because he is slated to pitch against them on, I think it's April the 8th.
The home opener for the Yankees,
Be facing Chris Bassett. That'd be a game worth seeing. But, yeah, I mean, spring training is far different. If you're a gambler and you gamble on spring training, you're sick. You're a sick human being.
Well, NFL preseason, you're going to be into the third string quarterback by the second quarter, right? Like get at that point, you got to get the pick out of your vein. Do as you will, but like don't ride or die with preseason anything in sports.
That's our lesson for the day.
Yeah. Get the pick out of your arm. We should do a segment there, something. But yeah, no, it's just good to have it back, Griff, and it's that fun tease. Of course, you're looking at people in the crowd wearing T-shirts and basking in the sun that is to come in our part of the world, but is far from here yet.
Yeah, one of the greatest experiences at spring training is the Phillies Clearwater Park, where you can go to the Tiki Bar out in left field, watch the game. It's right over the bullpen, and during March Madness, they'll have every game on that Tiki Hut TV sets. They'll have one game on the game, but on the game that you're watching. But you're watching. It is a great experience, and they keep serving at that bar until an hour after the game before they start throwing people out. That's what spring training is all about.
That's what it's all about. From a working perspective, Philly's got a really nice press box because it's a newer stadium. I still have photos of me, Griff, placing my laptop. I think you and I actually might have shared the top of a garbage can in the Bradenton McKechnie Field, Pitt. Like, I love Pittsburgh's little spring training ballpark in Bradenton, but the press box, not that anybody cares about this, but I'm not complaining. It's kind of a fun story to look back on. But you and I had to share one of the tops of those covered big garbage cans and sit our laptops there, because the Altoona mirror the Altoona Mirror had a dedicated seat. There was never a reporter from the Altoona Mirror, but you were getting talked to if you sat at the seat belonging to the ghost of the person who works and writes for the Altoona Mirror.
Ironically, I remember that writing on top of that garbage can was one of my best columns of the spring that year. Just saying. Yeah. I got one legit question I've been meaning to ask you for weeks now, but I'm just looking at my list of topics. And this is a good question. It's thought-provoking. People will have different opinions. If Jordan Romano went on the 10-day IL, or if he had pitched 2 days, 3 days in a row and needed a day off, who would you have close on this current Blue Jays roster? I mean, your candidates are Eric Swanson, Chad Green, Genesis Cabrera, Tim Meza, Jimmy Garcia, Trevor Richards. Who's your alternate closer?
Like I know who the guy who jumps out at me is at the moment, but I don't want somebody to like comment on our YouTube page 3 weeks from now going, man, Chad Green can't throw a strike and looks like hell. And you want him to be the closer if Romano goes on the DL or on the IL? But Chad Green is the guy who jumps out to me, Griff, as I just, especially after he cleared that major hurdle late last August of entering a minor league game mid-inning. No sarcasm there. No, but in all seriousness, Chad Green has pitched in leverage for the New York Yankees in playoffs. He's further removed now from his Tommy John ligament replacement surgery in his elbow. If he comes out this spring chucking, I think he's, well, I mean, who's a top leverage guy anymore? Who's the 8th inning guy anymore? You have multiple 8th inning guys. There's Swanson, there's Meza if the matchup is right because he's a left-hander. But I would say it's Chad Green who I would, throw out there, all things being equal. He's throwing his stuff, he's hitting his spots, he's got his velocity. It's Chad Green. Who's it for you?
I didn't even include Wyrod, who the Cuban guy. He's not a kid.
Well, he's got the heat, but we don't know enough about him yet, right?
I think they want, because of the fact that they're treating him as a starter at spring training. My feeling is that he'd be either a swing guy, which I think he is going to be, like get the occasional start, but also be available. So I don't think he'd be the guy. I love Jimmy Garcia, but every time he comes in a big situation, he has not performed the way that the consistency that you want to see from your closer. Swanson, I still remember in the playoffs, the Mariners didn't use him in the 2 games against the Jays, and that worries me because he was healthy at the time. And is there something? I mean, to me, he's got the stuff of a great 8th inning guy. Mm-hmm. And that 9th inning guy, you bring in somebody who can blow people away. And Jordan Romano is more of a slider, fastball type guy, but he's the guy. And when you talk about who's really got closer stuff, the fact that MLB.com didn't include Jordan Romano on their top 10 list is head scratching. And they put some guys who aren't even real closers there and didn't have Jordan Romano on that list. So basically, the bottom line, Tim Meza in certain situations with left-handers coming up might be a guy, but they don't have any clear-cut second option as a closer, but they have a lot of damn good arms down there, and it goes deep. So I think I would rather have it built the way the Jays have it now, rather than have 2 closers and one of them acting as a setup guy. I'd rather have depth and a good rotation like the Jays do. And 26 runs allowed in 2 games heading into Monday's action is not what you're looking for, but it's nothing to be concerned about because we all know what happens in Grapefruit League and when it turns into the regular season. So I really, Swanson would have to be that guy, but I don't trust him as much as Maybe Chad Green. Maybe you're right. Maybe I'll go with Chad Green.
If the Blue Jays win 90+ games and go to the World Series this year, Griff, you're going to ask me if you remember to. You remember what happened against the Phillies and the Yankees that first weekend of Grapefruit League? And I'm going to say, well, now that you bring it up, they gave up a lot of runs. But otherwise, no, I don't. It's nothing to worry about.
With the closer situation, I mean, even the Astros, Ryan Presley would not be my guy, my first choice, but he's done it for a team that's gone to the postseason deep and won World Series. And so you don't need to throw 98, 99. And you just need.
Oh, and they have Josh Hader now.
Yeah. So now back into an 8th inning role. But
Hader throws back-to-back days, and you've got a save situation on that third day, and Hader's down, and Presley's available. Ryan,
yeah,
you're a guy, right? Depth is never a bad thing.
Yeah. But the Jays have saved money on their 9-man, 8-man bullpen that can be spent elsewhere.
Okay,
like
so
Matt Chapman.
Well, and I was going to circle back to our initial topic, and you made it very clear. Like we're just talking ball and things that make sense to us, and they either do or don't make sense to you. And you can comment underneath the episode at youtube.com/exitphilosophy. Prediction. So what percent, first of all, before the prediction, what percentage do you give the likelihood of Matt Chapman returning to the Blue Jays now that the Cody Bellinger contract with the Chicago Cubs has been signed? And it was not what anybody anticipated when the hot stove offseason began. Number one. And number two, do you think we're sitting here next week or 2 weeks from now, Griff? Because the decision's you got to get into camp at some point here soon. I expect a domino effect off Bellinger. Like, these guys got to get into camp with whoever they're playing for, get acclimated, get to know the coaches, get to know their new teammates if they're going to different teams, et cetera, et cetera. Do you think there's a chance Matt Chapman is a Toronto Blue Jay when we record Exit Philosophy next week?
Like you said earlier, we're doing this on Monday, just before the Blue Jays play their exhibition game against the Pirates. I say 33% chance that he signs with the Blue Jays.
That's higher than I would have thought. Okay.
I think there's only like 33% chance. If there's 3 teams still interested, that's the 33% right there. I think.
Yeah. Okay.
There's a 60% chance that he should sign with the Blue Jays. 33% chance that he will sign with the Blue Jays, and I think it's going to happen sometime this week. But I've been saying that every week, hoping that at some point, I haven't been saying it specifically about Matt Chapman, but I've been saying that big things are going to happen.
Yeah.
There's going to be trades, there's going to be signings, and one of these days, with the season approaching, with the Grapefruit League in full swing, I say it's going to happen this week.
Well, with that, we will see how it plays out. And Griff and I have a YouTube page. If you're listening wherever you get your podcasts, youtube.com/exitphilosophy is where you can watch us. And I try to envision, like, why would anybody want to actually look at us on YouTube during the podcast? But sometimes, hey, you want to throw us on in the background. You're making dinner. You're settling in for the evening. Talking to people is not interesting. So listening to two guys bark about baseball, kind of fun. You can do that, youtube.com/exit philosophy. Please subscribe. Please comment. Throw us a like. And we will go live when big things happen with the Toronto Blue Jays. And I think a Matt Chapman signing, if it happens, Griff, especially because we called for it, would be going live on youtube.com/exit philosophy worthy.
And with the YouTube version of Exit Philosophy, please, if you're watching, subscribe, because we're trying to build up our subscription list. Bob Elliott, to his credit, and we love Bob, ranked
Bobo.
the 67th most influential Canadians was Exit Philosophy with Scotty Mac and Griff. And next year, if you subscribe to the YouTube Exit Philosophy, next year we hope to move into the 50s. So that's our goal. And we're working on it. We're trying to be legit advisors to the Blue Jays front office, not prognosticators. We're not guessing. We're just telling them what they should do. And if they listen, they listen. If they don't, they don't. But 33% Matt Chapman, 50 to 60% if I was Matt Chapman re-signing with the Blue Jays. But thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. Thank you, Scotty Mac, for hosting. And we'll talk to you next week.
Yeah, and just want to close. Shout out to Ben Wagner, who is now a member of the Baltimore Orioles broadcast team. He'll be doing some radio. He'll be doing some TV on their Mid-Atlantic Sports Network, Masson broadcasts. Ben was always going to land on his feet. He's always deserved the best. And with some changes going on in Orioles land, specifically at the ownership level, I think he's entering a really good opportunity, which he more than deserves. He's too classy to say anything. I'm not classy, so I'll say it, which he more than deserves after the garbage treatment he received over the last 6 years. Love you, Benny, and glad you're staying in the American League East.
Thanks, Scotty. Thanks, everyone.